I
thought
pushed
I'd
open the
lost you
apartment door
forever.
expecting a quiet night, but the sound of Lena's laugh stopped
I'm
me cold.
finally home.
I heard another voice with her, low and familiar, and my chest tightened before I even stepped inside. I whispered, "No, that can't be him," but I already knew it was Ethan. I moved closer and heard Lena say, "You make me feel alive in ways he never could." My heart cracked at her voice, soft and playful, like she was talking to the man she actually wanted. Ethan replied, "He's too gentle to notice anything. You deserve excitement." I stepped into the living room and said, "So this is what you call excitement?" Lena looked over her shoulder, annoyed, like I had interrupted a movie instead of catching Betrayal. She said, "You weren't supposed to be home yet." I stared at Ethan, waiting for him to say something, anything, but he kept his eyes on the floor. I said, "After everything we've been through, this is what you do to me." Ethan whispered, "It just happened. I didn't plan it." I laughed, though nothing felt funny, and said, "You planned it the moment you walked into my home like you owned it." Lena rolled her eyes and said, "Stop being dramatic. We didn't hurt you on purpose." I said, "You didn't hurt me on purpose. You tore my life apart in my own house." Ethan stood up and reached toward me, saying, "Let's talk outside." I stepped back. "Don't touch me. Not after this." He lowered his hand and said, "I didn't want to hurt you, man." I snapped, "But you did. No, you didn't even stop to think what it would do to me." Lena crossed her arms and said, "Maybe if you gave me what I needed, I wouldn't be here." I stared at her, stunned, and said, "What you needed was honesty, but you chose desire instead." Ethan muttered, "We didn't mean for you to find out like this." I said, "There is no right way to discover betrayal." Lena sighed and said, "Can you stop acting like a victim? You're making this harder than it needs to be." I whispered, 3 years, Lena. 3 years, and this is what I get." She shrugged and said, "People change. Maybe we just grew apart." I looked at Ethan and said, "And you? What's your excuse?" He murmured, "I don't know, I wasn't thinking straight." I said, "You were thinking clearly enough to betray your best friend." Lena snapped, "Stop making him feel guilty. You're acting pathetic." I felt the last piece of my heart break as I said, "I'm done. Both of you can have each other." Ethan stepped forward, saying, "Wait, don't leave like this." I turned away and said, "I'm leaving before I lose what little strength I have left." Lena's voice followed me, sharp and cold. "Then go. We'll be happier anyway." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My chest felt heavy, and my hands shook as I walked out the door. Ethan called after me. "Can we talk tomorrow?" Said there's nothing left to say. I stepped into the hallway and let the silence swallow me whole. I leaned against the wall and whispered, "How did everything fall apart so fast?" My voice cracked, and I said, "Why wasn't I enough for her?" No one answered, but I kept talking anyway, hoping the empty hallway would give me strength. I said I gave her everything, trusted Ethan with my whole heart. My breath trembled as I added, and they threw it away like it meant nothing. I walked slowly down the stairs, and every step felt heavier than the last. I muttered, "I don't know how to even breathe after this." My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. Knowing it was one of them trying to twist the story again, I reached the building entrance and whispered, "I need to get out before I break down right here." Pushed open the door and felt. The cold air hit my face, clearing my thoughts just enough to stand. I whispered, "This is the end of us," and walked into night. I threw clothes into a bag without folding anything. Lena stood in the doorway watching me like she was waiting for a bus. I said, "You're really not going to say a single word?" She shrugged and muttered, "What do you want me to say?" I zipped the bag hard and answered, "Maybe something human. Maybe an apology." She sighed, "You're making this dramatic again." I stared at her and whispered, "I loved you." She didn't react, not even a blink. That silence hurt worse than the cheating. As I walked past her, she said, "You'll calm down eventually." I stopped and replied, "No, I won't." Then I left before she could pretend she cared. Outside, my phone buzzed non-stop. Ethan kept messaging, "We need to talk. Don't act like this. You're blowing it out of proportion." I whispered, of course he'd blame me, and shoved my phone in my pocket. Mrs. Harper opened her front door before I even knocked. "You look tired, dear." "Come inside," she said gently. I stepped in and she asked, "Trouble at home?" Forced a smile and said something like that. She didn't push. She simply said, "Your room is upstairs to the right. Fresh sheets. If you need tea, call me." Her kindness hit me harder than Lena's coldness. When I set my bag down in the small room, I whispered, "This is really happening." My phone buzzed again. "Ethan, this time. Talk to me, man." "You're being unfair," I muttered. "Unfair? No. You cheated with my girlfriend?" and tossed my phone onto the bed. Hours later, someone knocked lightly. "Hey, are you the new tenant?" a soft voice asked. I opened the door to see a girl around my age holding a stack of folded towels. "I'm Maya," she said. "Aunt Harper told me to bring these." I took them and said, "Thanks. I'm just trying to settle in." She nodded slowly. "Long day." I breathed out, "Yeah. The worst one of my life." She didn't ask what happened. Instead, she said, "If you need company later, I'm in the room downstairs. I make good hot chocolate." I managed a small smile. "That actually sounds nice." She smiled back, gentle and understanding, and said, "You look like you could use something warm." When she left, the room felt painfully quiet. I sat on the bed, staring at my hands. Why wasn't I enough? I whispered. Why did she choose him? Why throw everything away? My chest tightened and I rubbed my face, trying to breathe. My phone buzzed again. I checked it reluctantly. "Lena, you left things messy. Come get your other stuff tomorrow." "Ethan, stop ignoring me. We should talk like adults." I typed, "Leave me alone," but deleted it. I didn't want to give either of them anything again, not anger, not honesty, nothing. Instead, I turned my phone off completely and lay back on the bed. Minutes later, I heard Maya's voice through the door. "Still awake?" she asked softly. I opened it a little and she held out a mug. "Thought you'd want it," she said. I took it carefully. "Thank you. Really." She smiled. "You don't have to pretend you're fine. You look like you're holding in a hurricane." I let out a shaky breath. Someone I loved betrayed me, and the worst part isn't the betrayal. It's wondering if it was my fault. Maya frowned. "Hey, no. People choose to betray because it's easy, not because you deserve it." I swallowed hard. "It just feels like I wasn't enough." She shook her head firmly. "Ow. No one deserves that kind of pain." I stared into the mug. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I hear them laughing. Maya leaned against the wall and said quietly, "Then don't close your eyes yet. Talk to me instead." I hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." We sat on the edge of the bed, the room dim and quiet. I told her I keep wondering what I did wrong. She said, "Sometimes people choose desire over devotion." "But that's not on you," I whispered. I gave her everything, and she chose him. Maya placed a hand on the mug I was gripping too tightly and said, "Then she didn't deserve what you gave." Her words made something loosen inside me, something painful but necessary. I whispered, "Thank you, Maya." She gave me a small smile. "You're not alone anymore." When she left, I stared at the closed door and murmured, "Maybe not." But the pain still followed me into the night. When I walked into work, I hoped for distraction, but Jordan stopped me the moment I reached my desk. He whispered, "Hey, you okay? You look like you didn't sleep." I forced a shrug. "Rough week." He hesitated, then said, "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to flip out." I frowned. "Just say it." Jordan looked around and leaned closer. "Ethan, he's been bragging." My stomach tightened. "Bragging about what?" Jordan swallowed hard. "About stealing your girl?" "He said he did it just to prove he could." I stared at him, stunned. "He said it like that?" Jordan nodded. Exact words. "He's too soft. Even his girl got bored waiting for him to grow a spine." My breath caught, and I whispered, "He planned it?" Jordan whispered back, "Seems like it. I thought you should know." The floor felt unsteady again. I said, "Where is he?" Jordan pointed toward the hall. "In his office, but man, don't lose it." I shook my head. "I'm done losing. I just want the truth." I walked straight to Ethan's door and knocked hard. "Come in," he said casually. When I stepped inside, he smirked. "Oh, you." I closed the door behind me. You bragged about stealing Lena? He leaned back in his chair. Is that what Jordan told you? I said, I want your answer. Ethan chuckled. Fine, yeah, I said something like that. Why? You gonna cry about it? My fists clenched. Why would you do that to me? Ethan shrugged, wearing a smug grin. Because you're predictable. You never fight back. I wanted to see if you'd actually grow a pair. I whispered, you ruined my relationship to test me. He laughed. She wasn't happy with you anyway. I just accelerated things. You think this makes you strong? He smirked. It makes me honest. Women don't want soft men. My voice dropped low. You didn't win anything. You just showed who you really are. He waved a hand dismissively. Whatever makes you sleep at night. I stepped closer and said quietly, one day you'll regret everything you just said. Ethan rolled his eyes. Sure, keep living in your fantasy world. The door. I'm done with you, Ethan. For good, he called after me. You were done long before that. I walked out shaking with rage. Jordan was waiting near my desk. You talked to him? He asked softly. He confirmed everything. Jordan winced. Damn, I'm sorry, man. Sat down, rubbing my face. I didn't think someone could hate me that much. Jordan shook his head. He doesn't hate you. He just likes stepping on people to feel tall. I let out a shaky breath. Well, he stepped hard. Jordan pulled up a chair. Listen, I'm not trying to get in your business, but you don't deserve that crap from either of them. I gave a bitter laugh. Apparently everyone thinks I'm soft. Jordan snorted. Soft? No. Hurt. Yeah. But soft? Nah, you're still standing after all this. His words hit me deeper than I expected. I feel like I'm barely holding together, I admitted. Jordan crossed his arms. Then hold together one day at a time. You don't have to be fine yet. I hesitated, then asked, why are you helping me? Jordan shrugged lightly. Because I've been there. Betrayal changes you, but it doesn't have to break you, I whispered. Feels like it already has. He shook his head. Not yet. You're still talking, still showing up. That means something. I looked at my hands and murmured, I don't know who I am without them. Jordan leaned in. Then figure it out. For you. Not for revenge. Not for Lena. Not for that jerk. For you. His words hung heavy in the air. I reached for a notebook buried in my drawer. Jordan raised an eyebrow. You writing something? I nodded slowly. I think I need to get this mess out of my head. Jordan said, good. Write it all. Anger, hurt, everything. I opened the notebook and whispered, I don't know where to start. Jordan said, start with the truth. What they did, how it felt, and what you want for yourself now. I exhaled shakily. I want to stop drowning, he whispered, then write your way to the surface. I put pen to paper and wrote the first line. They broke me, but I'm still here. Jordan stood and said, if you need someone to talk to later, I'm around. I nodded. Thank you, Jordan, gave a small smile. Anytime. As he walked away, I stared at the page and whispered, I choose survival. Even if it's slow, and for the first time since everything shattered, I felt a tiny spark of something, maybe strength. Maybe clarity begin to grow inside me. I saw Claire for the first time in the grocery store. And the moment she spoke Ethan's name, something inside me twisted. I forced a smile, but she noticed the way my hand froze on the shopping basket. She asked if I knew him well, and I whispered, yeah, too well. She tilted her head, confusion forming, and I felt my throat tighten. I didn't want to lie, yet I couldn't tell the truth in that fluorescent aisle. I muttered that I had somewhere to be and walked off before my voice cracked, back in my room that evening. Her confused expression kept replaying in my head until it became unbearable. I stared at my phone for a long time before typing, deleting, and retyping a message. Eventually I wrote, we need to talk about Ethan, please. My fingers trembled as I hit send. I paced the tiny space, half hoping she wouldn't respond, half desperate for her to. When her reply came, when and where, I felt something heavy drop inside me. I wasn't ready, but I also knew she deserved the truth that had destroyed me. We met at a quiet cafe near the river, and the first thing she said was, "You look like you haven't slept in days." I almost laughed at how accurate it was. I told her I appreciated her meeting me, and she nodded with a steady calm I couldn't match. When she asked, "Is it about Ethan?" I inhaled sharply. I told her it was, and she leaned forward, bracing herself. I said I needed her to listen without stopping me, and she agreed with a trembling breath, so I told her. I told her how I walked into my apartment and heard Lena with him. I told her the words I heard, the way my chest felt like it was splitting open, the way Ethan wouldn't even meet my eyes. She didn't interrupt once. Her hands covered her mouth as I spoke, and her shoulders shook, though she made no sound. When I finally said, "I didn't know he was married," she broke, whispering, "I can't believe he did this." Her tears slid down slowly, each one echoing the pieces of myself I had been trying to hold together. I whispered that I was sorry, even though none of it was my doing. She shook her head and told me not to apologize for someone else's cruelty. She asked how long it had been happening, and I admitted I didn't know. The shame in her eyes wasn't for herself, but for the lies she had been living inside without realizing. She said, "I thought he was distant because of work." I told her I had thought Lena was tired, overwhelmed, anything but unfaithful. We traded broken assumptions like they were confessions neither of us had ever wanted to make. She asked what I planned to do now. I told her I didn't know yet. I said I was still trying to remember how to breathe without everything hurting. She nodded slowly, saying she felt the same, that her home suddenly felt unfamiliar and cold. I told her she wasn't alone. She whispered that she hadn't expected kindness from someone who was hurting as much as she was. I admitted I didn't expect strength from myself either. She said maybe healing isn't about strength, but about finding someone who understands the same kind of hurt. We sat there in silence until she finally asked if I regretted telling her. I said I didn't, because lies only rot in the dark, and we had both lived in enough shadows already. She wiped her face and told me she wished she had met me under different circumstances. I agreed, saying our lives shouldn't have crossed at the edge of someone else's betrayal. She took a slow breath and asked if we could talk again, not about Ethan, but about surviving the wreckage he left behind. I told her yes, because her pain felt like the mirror I had been afraid to look into. And somehow sharing it made the weight feel bearable in that quiet, fading evening light that seemed to hold us together. I didn't expect to hear from Claire again so soon, but she texted me the next morning asking how I was holding up. I found myself answering before I even thought about it. I wrote that I was trying to keep myself together, and she replied that she understood. She said she barely slept and felt like her chest had been hit by something heavy. I told her I knew that feeling too well. She asked if I wanted to talk in person, and I agreed without hesitation. Almost relieved someone finally spoke to me without judgment today, honestly, when we met near the small park bench. She greeted me with a quiet hey, and I could hear the strain under her voice. I asked if she was managing, and she said she felt like she was walking through fog. I told her I felt the same way, like everything around me had turned dull. She asked what hurt the most, and I admitted it was the way Lena looked bored when I found her with Ethan. Claire shook her head and said, Ethan had looked annoyed the first time she cried over his cheating. That admission stunned me. We sat together for a long moment before she asked if I still blamed myself. I told her I tried not to, but the guilt crept in at night when everything felt too quiet. She said she knew that feeling, like a shadow waiting to swallow whatever good was left. I asked her why she stayed with Ethan after the first betrayal, and she whispered that she believed loyalty meant holding on even when it hurt. I told her I had thought the same with Lena, and that realization made both of us fall into a heavy silence right then. When I returned to the house later, Maya noticed the shift in my expression. She asked if I had talked to someone, and I admitted I met Claire again. Maya crossed her arms and warned me not to confuse shared pain with healing. I told her it wasn't like that Claire and I simply understood each other in a way no one else could. Maya said understanding could still lead to heartbreak if I wasn't careful. I promised her I was trying to breathe again. She sighed and told me she hoped I knew what I was doing. Later that evening, Claire sent another message asking if talking earlier had helped me at all. I told her it did, that hearing someone speak without anger or excuses felt strangely calming. She said she felt the same, that sharing her thoughts with someone who didn't judge made her feel less invisible. I told her she never deserved to feel invisible. She thanked me for saying that, and admitted she hadn't heard kindness in a long time. I said she deserved better than what Ethan had given her. She replied that maybe someday she might believe that again herself tonight. As I lay in bed afterward, I kept replaying our conversations in my mind. I realized she never asked for anything from me, never pushed, never expected comforting words. She just listened in a way that made my chest loosen. I whispered to myself that maybe that was why it felt easier to breathe around her. I didn't feel judged or compared or blamed. I felt human again. I remembered Maya's warning and told myself I wasn't falling for anyone. I was simply finding a quiet place to stand. For the first time in weeks, the darkness felt lighter today. Before I drifted to sleep, my phone buzzed one last time with a short message from Claire. She wrote, "Thank you for today. I didn't feel alone for once." I stared at her words longer than I should have and replied, "You're not alone. Not anymore." She sent a small heart. Nothing romantic, just a gentle sign that she felt understood. I placed my phone on the pillow beside me and breathed slowly, letting the quiet fill the room. Maybe neither of us was healing yet, but we were no longer breaking alone. Somehow, that simple truth carried me forward. When Claire told me she planned to confront Ethan, I asked if she was sure, and she said she was done living in the dark. I told her I would stand with her if she needed it, but she said, "No, I need to look him in the eyes myself." Later that day she called me, her voice shaking as she whispered that he was already trying to lie. She said he claimed I made everything up because I was jealous. I told her I expected him to twist the truth. She replied that she was tired of being fooled. When she showed him the screenshots I sent, she said his whole expression changed. She told me he tried to grab the phone from my hand like a child caught stealing. I asked what he said then, and she muttered that he tried blaming Lena, claiming she seduced him. I told Claire that Ethan never took blame for anything. She said she finally saw what I had been seeing all along. I asked if he apologized. She answered not once. He only panicked about his image. Hearing that made my stomach tighten. Word spread at his office, faster than I expected. Jordan told me coworkers were whispering in the halls, saying Ethan wasn't the man he pretended to be. When Jordan pulled me aside, he said, "Your boy is melting down in slow motion." I told him I didn't want chaos, only truth. Jordan said truth was enough to burn someone like Ethan. Later that night, Lena called me out of nowhere. When I answered, she asked, "Can we talk?" And I told her there was nothing left to talk about. She said Ethan wasn't who she thought, and I told her I already knew that. When she tried to explain herself, I cut her off and said I didn't want her guilt. She insisted she made a mistake. I replied, "You made a choice, not a mistake." She grew quiet before saying she missed me. I told her missing me didn't erase what happened. She whispered that Ethan was falling apart. I told her that was his problem. She said she wished things were different, and I simply hung up. My hand shook a little afterward. Not from sadness, but from the strange calm that settled over me. A day later, Claire told me she filed for legal separation. She said she felt cold doing it, but free. I asked if she was holding up, and she told me she cried the whole night after filing. I said it was normal, that endings hurt even when they're right. She said she didn't know how to explain the emptiness. I told her emptiness was what healing sounded like at first. She whispered, "I'm scared," and I told her I was too. Hearing her breathe through the phone made me feel less alone. I told her she was stronger than she believed. Later that week, Ethan started spiraling. Jordan said Ethan came to work smelling like alcohol. HR called him in after he snapped at a client. When Jordan told me this, I didn't feel triumph. I just nodded quietly. Jordan asked if I was satisfied. I told him satisfaction wasn't the right word. He asked what word fit better. I said clarity. He snorted and told me I was too philosophical for someone watching karma in real time. I told him I wasn't watching karma, I was watching consequences. He laughed and said consequences looked good on Ethan. That night, Claire called again. She said Ethan begged her not to leave. I asked how she responded, and she said she told him begging didn't make him faithful. I asked if she felt guilty. She said she felt sad but not guilty. I told her sadness was allowed. She asked if it bothered me that everything was falling apart for him. I told her, I'm not ruining his life. His choices are. She grew quiet before saying, thank you for reminding me I'm not crazy. I said she never was. Her small laugh eased something inside me. When I hung up, I sat on my bed and breathed slowly. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel crushed. I whispered to myself that I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't chasing justice. I was simply stepping out of the pain that used to swallow me whole. Ethan's life was collapsing because of the lies he built it on. Mine was starting to rebuild piece by piece. As I lay back, I realized something peaceful was settling inside me. Something I hadn't felt since before the betrayal. Maybe it was strength. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was both. I stepped out of the office building, the sun hot on my back, when a voice behind me cut through the air like a knife. You ruined everything, Ethan yelled, his face red, veins bulging. I froze for half a second. Memories of every betrayal, every stolen laugh, every lie flooding through me. Then I exhaled and turned to face him fully. No, I said calmly. You ruined everything yourself. His eyes widened, and I continued. I'm done taking the blame for the choices you made. He took a step closer, his fists clenched. You think you can just walk away? You think you're clean? I shook my head slowly. I think I'm done carrying your mess. I'm not responsible for your lies, your cheating, your games. That's on you. My voice was calm, steady, stronger than I expected. Ethan blinked rapidly like he couldn't believe the words were coming from me. You think you're better than me? He spat, his jaw tight. You think people will pity you? I smiled faintly, a cold curve. I don't need pity. I need peace. And peace doesn't come from blaming myself for the chaos you created. He took a step back, almost stumbling, clearly shocked at the calm, measured version of me standing there. I felt a strange power rise inside, a mix of clarity and quiet fury. Oh, not aimed at him, but at the old me who would have cowered before this confrontation. You're wrong, he said finally, voice trembling. You're nothing without her, nothing without me. I shook my head, stepping closer to match his anger with unwavering resolve. I'm everything I choose to be. I'm choosing myself, Ethan, and that's more than you've ever done. He opened his mouth, probably to yell, but I cut him off. Don't speak. I'm done listening to lies. You made your life. I'm making mine. His face flickered between rage and disbelief. You'll regret this, he hissed. I let him say it, then turned and walked away, the weight of his shouting fading behind me. For the first time, I didn't feel fear, only a strange exhilaration. Like walking out of a cage I didn't even know I'd been in. My steps felt lighter, my chest less heavy. I was not healed, but I was no longer broken by someone else's choices. That night, I sat on my small rented bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation over and over. I realized I had changed in ways that mattered. The man who once walked out on Lena in silent tears was gone. I had learned to stand, to speak, to claim my own life. My reflection in the small mirror on the wall showed a face still worn, still tired, but more determined than I had ever been. I whispered to myself, I choose me. I repeated it, letting it sink into my bones. I wasn't expecting instant relief, just the quiet knowledge that I had set a boundary I hadn't dared to before. I felt the echoes of my old self fading, replaced by someone who would not let devotion become weakness. I promised silently that no one would control my heart through lies again. I picked up a notebook and wrote down a list, small goals, routines, changes I could make for myself. Wake early, exercise, call Maya once a week, meditate, focus at work. Each line on the paper felt like reclaiming a piece of myself stolen by betrayal and guilt. I wrote, devotion is for me first, and paused, letting the words settle in my mind. I smiled faintly, the first smile that felt untainted by grief or anger in weeks. I called Claire later, and we spoke briefly about life moving forward. She asked how I felt after today. I told her, calmer, stronger, more aware that my happiness was mine to claim. She laughed softly and said she could hear it in my voice. I told her it wasn't about her. Not really. It was about me. She understood without needing more explanation. I hung up, feeling lighter, as if acknowledging my own strength allowed it to exist in the world, before sleep claimed me. I reviewed my day, the confrontation, the choices, the plans. I wasn't healed, but I was no longer lost. I had faced someone who tried to define me and walked away knowing I defined myself instead. For the first time in months, I believed I could rebuild, carefully, steadily, without letting past devotion chain me to pain. Tomorrow would be the first day of that work. And I was ready. I sat with Claire on the small bench outside the cafe, the evening breeze brushing against my face as she spoke. "I'm sorry," she whispered, wiping her eyes quickly as if trying to hide the fact that she was breaking. "I didn't mean to fall apart like this." I shook my head gently and leaned closer. "Claire," I murmured, "you don't have to apologize to me. Not for crying, not for feeling anything." My voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. She let out a trembling breath and pressed her palms together tightly, as if holding herself from collapsing again. "I keep telling myself I should be stronger," she said, her voice cracking, "but I feel worthless. I feel unlovable. I feel like maybe everything he said about me was true." Hearing those words hit me harder than I expected. They were the same words I had whispered into my own hands on the night. Everything shattered. I reached out carefully and placed my hand on hers. "You're not worthless," I said. "You're not unlovable. And whatever Ethan said came from his own brokenness, not yours." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked away, eyes glistening. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "I used to feel steady. I used to feel sure. But now I feel like I'm made of glass. Like one wrong move and I'll break again." I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of her pain settle heavily on my chest. "Claire," I said softly. "Look at me." She hesitated, then lifted her gaze. "You're allowed to break. You're allowed to hurt. None of this was your fault." Her shoulders shook, and she leaned forward and rested her forehead against my chest. "I hate this," she whispered. "I hate feeling like nothing." Her voice grew smaller. "I hate that he made me feel disposable." I wrapped my arms around her gently, feeling her hands grip my shirt. "You're not disposable," I told her, my voice low but firm. "You deserved loyalty. You deserved honesty. You deserved someone who respected you." Her breath stuttered as she inhaled sharply. "Why didn't he?" she asked. "Why wasn't I enough?" My chest tightened because I had asked the same question too many times. "It wasn't about you," I said. "It was about him. His choices. His selfishness." She pressed closer, her tears dampening my shirt, and I closed my eyes. "You really think that?" she asked shakily. "I know that," I answered. "And I wish someone had told me that when I needed it." She let out a soft, broken laugh. "I didn't think anyone understood," she whispered. "Everyone tells me to move on, but they don't get how deep it cuts." I nodded slowly. "I understand," I said. "More than I wish I did." She lifted her head slightly, eyes red but full of trust. "Thank you," she murmured, "for being here. For listening." "You never needed judgment," I said. "Just honesty. Just someone who sees you." She swallowed hard and placed her hand over mine. "You make it feel less impossible," she whispered. The healing, the breathing, felt something shift inside me. "You help me too," I admitted. "Talking to you makes my pain feel less loud." She stared at me for a long moment, something steady settling between us. "Maybe we can get through this together." "Yeah," I whispered. "Maybe we can." She leaned back, wiping her cheeks with her hand. "I keep wondering," she said, "if healing is supposed to feel this slow. If maybe I'm doing it wrong?" I shook my head. "There's no right pace," I told her. "Some days you'll feel strong, others you won't. That doesn't mean you're failing." She nodded, eyes uncertain. "It scares me," she admitted, letting myself feel anything again. Even this. Talking to you. It feels safe, unfamiliar. I felt her hesitation and breathed in quietly. She looked at me again. "Do you think we'll feel whole?" she asked. I thought before answering. Maybe not the same, I said, but maybe better. Maybe we rebuild differently. She exhaled slowly, as if the idea gave her a small anchor for now. I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed with a message from Jordan. Ethan just lost it with a manager. Suspension incoming. I blinked, staring at the screen, unable to feel anything at first. Then a slow, strange relief settled over me. I didn't rejoice. Exactly. I just felt like the universe had finally caught up with him. Jordan called me a few minutes later. You won't believe what happened, he said, his voice tight with amusement. I asked him to explain. He told me Ethan had screamed at his manager in the middle of the office, accusing him of conspiring against him. People are stunned, Jordan said. HR had no choice. He's suspended indefinitely. I let out a quiet breath. It felt like watching a storm come for someone who refused to respect the calm. Later that week, I heard from an old friend of Lena's. Apparently, she was trying to contact everyone she knew, looking for sympathy, but no one wanted to deal with her drama. I wasn't sure whether to feel pity or satisfaction. Instead, I chose indifference. Lena had made her choice. She had wanted desire over devotion, and now she was left to face the consequences. One afternoon, Claire called me. I'm signing the divorce papers tomorrow, she said softly. I asked if she wanted me there. She hesitated, then whispered, if you're comfortable? Yes. I want someone who's seen the truth, agreed immediately. The next day, I walked with her to the courthouse. The air smelled of rain and pavement, heavy with the quiet tension of endings. We didn't speak much on the way, but our silence wasn't awkward. It was shared understanding. When we arrived, Claire's hands were slightly trembling. She gripped the papers like they were lifelines. I placed my hand lightly on her shoulder. You're doing the right thing, I said. She nodded, taking a deep breath before entering the building. I followed behind her. Inside, the clerk handed her a pen, and she signed each line carefully, deliberately. She paused at the last one, then looked at me, eyes shining. Thank you for helping me see my own worth again, she whispered. I felt warmth spread through my chest. Unlike anything I had felt during all the chaos and heartbreak, we left the office and stood outside for a moment. The rain had stopped, and the clouds were thinning. Claire laughed softly, a sound I hadn't heard in months, and said, It feels strange to feel free. I smiled, telling her, Freedom often feels strange the first time you hold it. She looked at me, a spark of trust and relief in her eyes. I couldn't have done this alone, she admitted. Not without someone who knew the truth. Later, I heard from Jordan again. You should see the aftermath, he said. I asked him to explain. He told me Ethan had shown up at work for a brief check-in and received icy stares from everyone. He tried apologizing to coworkers, but no one cared. Lena had left him, officially gone, leaving him to face the empty apartment. Empty calls, empty promises. He's unraveling fast, Jordan said. I didn't gloat. I just felt calm. Justice was unfolding quietly, naturally, as it should. That night, Claire and I shared a coffee at the small cafe nearby. She sipped slowly, watching the steam curl from the cup. Do you ever think about revenge? She asked softly. I shook my head. No, I said. Not revenge. Just consequences. He made choices. This is the fallout he earned, she nodded. I used to wish I could hurt him, she said, but it's better this way. The truth has power. I told her she was right, and she smiled, a small but real smile. For the first time, I felt that maybe the world was fair. At least a little. Walking back, I realized how much distance I had traveled from the man who had once trembled outside Lena's apartment. I wasn't healed, but I wasn't crushed anymore. I had witnessed karma unfold in its own way, and the endings felt deserved. Pain had led us here, but understanding made it right. Claire had her freedom. Ethan faced the consequences of his choices. Lena. Well, Lena had no one to blame but herself. And me? I had regained a sense of calm I hadn't thought possible. I whispered to myself quietly, letting it sink in. Finally, it felt like justice. Months passed, and I could feel the weight of everything lifting slowly. Each morning, I woke with a little more clarity, a little more strength. I realized that the man who had crumbled in silence outside Lena's apartment no longer existed. He had been replaced by someone who understood that pain could break you or rebuild you. I walked down familiar streets and noticed details I had missed. Before, the way sunlight glinted off windows, the soft laughter of strangers passing by, the scent of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner. Life was still messy, still unpredictable, but it felt alive again. One afternoon, Claire and I met at our favorite cafe. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of coffee and rain-soaked pavement. I watched her stir her drink and realized I had been nervous all morning. Not about her, not about us, but about whether I was ready to feel something real again. She looked up, eyes catching mine, and smiled softly. "You've changed," she said. I shrugged, unsure how to respond. "I'm just finally honest with myself," I said. "That's all." "No." She nodded slowly, studying me. "I've changed too," she admitted. I stopped letting his lies define me. I stopped letting fear run my choices. I reached across the table and took her hand. It felt warm, solid, reassuring. "I don't know what the future holds," I whispered, "but I want to face it with you." She squeezed my hand gently, and her eyes glistened. "I want that too," she said. "No rushing, no expectations, just us figuring it out together." The simplicity of her words settled something in my chest, a long-buried sense of hope. Our conversations became our rhythm. We shared pieces of ourselves cautiously, but there was no pretense, no weight of obligation. She told me about small dreams she had shelved while trapped in someone else's world. I told her about the nights I had spent staring at my ceiling, writing down emotions I couldn't yet understand. We laughed quietly about the absurdity of life, and sometimes we sat in silence, comfortable with the understanding that our pain had led us here. Every word, every gesture felt deliberate, genuine, and slowly. I realized I was ready to let myself feel again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I walked her home. The streets glowed in amber light, and I felt a calm I hadn't known for months. "You know," she said, pausing at her door, "it's strange to feel safe again." I tilted my head. "Safe?" I asked. She smiled softly. "Yes, safe. Not because nothing can hurt me, but because I trust someone to be real with me. That's rare." I nodded, squeezing her hand once. "I promise to be real," I said. "Always. The past, the betrayals, the heartbreak, the nights filled with tears, felt distant, like shadows receding behind me. Ethan and Lena were ghosts, lingering only as lessons I had survived. I didn't hate them. I didn't dwell on them. I had learned that loyalty was not a weakness, but a gift, and I had given it to the wrong person once. Now, standing here, hand in hand with someone who understood its value, I knew I was giving it to the right person. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I didn't feel the tremor of doubt. I saw trust in her eyes, the same trust I had once desperately sought from someone who never deserved it. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. I smiled, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready. For this, for us, for everything we'll face together," she smiled, and I felt that my heart, rebuilt from ashes, could finally beat freely again. We stood there for a moment, hands intertwined, watching the sky turn from orange to deep violet. I realized that surviving heartbreak had not only made me stronger, it had taught me what mattered. Not revenge, not bitterness, not the pain I endured. What mattered was loyalty, honesty, and finding someone worthy of the trust I offered. And now, with Claire, I finally understood the beauty of giving my heart to someone who would cherish it. I whispered quietly, more to myself than to her, "We've made it this far, and I'm not looking back." She squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of everything we had endured and the future we were building together. The world felt lighter. Hope felt tangible, and for the first time in years, I smiled freely, knowing that my heart was no longer broken. It was rebuilt and stronger than ever.